had a hard time containing my disappointment with my last trip to a GameStop Retro south of Portland, and I was curious if that was a one-off experience, so I drove out west to a GameStop Retro in Hillsboro. Visually, it looked just like a typical GameStop, and their retro section again consisted of just 3 shelves. One thing of note is that instead of having a lot of Wii, this GameStop Retro had a lot of Nintendo DS in the box. But not real boxes, their own boxes. I was surprised to see a copy of Megaman Legends on the 3DS. They actually had a lot more Wii U games than Wii. The PlayStation 3 selection wasn't as robust as the other GameStop Retro that I went to. The majority were disc only. They had a grand total of 1 Xbox original game, but it was Conker's. It is still unknown if this is a cynical ploy to liquidate their old stock of games, but it sure does look like it. They definitely were not missing space, so it's still surprising that they had such a limited selection of retro games. And they did have an ample selection of Funko Pops. They did have a grand total of 7 NES cartridges that you had to ask for, and they kept them behind the counter. One thing that was a little concerning is that they weren't individually priced, and you had to actually scan them and to access the price in the database so they could rapidly change them, and they didn't seem to be marked down based on quality and condition. They had 2 N64 cartridges. One was behind the counter, and one was in the case with the Nintendo DS and 3DS games. I don't really know if this was dedicated retro or just stuff that they still had. They had less than 10 games on cartridge. There was no Super Nintendo, no Sega Genesis, no Saturn, no PlayStation 1, no PlayStation 2, and no Nintendo GameCube. It was a little better, but not by much. They actually had a 3DS, a 2DS, and they had a Wii and a Wii U. And they had this Atari emulation console next to the Nintendo Switch and the Xbox stuff. No word if they had a warranty on the lone Xbox 360 original that they had. Now, they did have a selection of retro tchotchkes, and they did have these little portable emulator systems, and I'm actually glad to see that they actually had the Super Pocket, even though the box was mangled, even though this was allegedly new. So the GameStop Retro stores are going to be stocked by retro games that are traded into other surrounding GameStop stores, but they didn't really seem to actually bother to stock it with a good supply of retro games to begin with. So it's almost like setting out a tip jar and having it empty. GameStop had a lot of money to stock their shelves with tchotchkes and toys, but not a lot of actual retro video games in a retro GameStop. I mean, this is basically a month after they launched GameStop Retro, and in my 2 trips to my local stores, I have yet to actually see anything that I wanted and didn't already have. My previous video had a lot of GameStop fans singing their praises of the store, but I am a big fan of retro video games, and I went to 2 of their retro stores, and I didn't find anything that I really was tempted to buy. And honestly, if you don't have the product to get money from me, then you sort of fail at capitalism in my eyes. I mean, no one appointed me the Retro Game Finder General, and there's no one more than me who wants to see the hobby of retro gaming and retro game enjoying and collecting grow and flourish. But so far, if this is the best that the biggest retro game store can do, then I really don't see anything too threatening to local independently run retro game stores. But by God, did they have a lot of Funko Pops. I wish that they had as much retro games at this retro GameStop as they have Funko Pops. But what gets me is there actually was some decent people going there to spend money, but I think that if they actually focused themselves on, selling games, they might actually have a success in doing that. I really hope that GameStop Retro improves in the future. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro. And I'm trying to not be a hater, but come on, do better.